Thank you so much for coming in, Curtis.
Thank you for having me, Fred.
Yeah, we're really excited to talk to you about this project.
Yeah, I was happy to speak with you as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So first of all, for our viewers who aren't familiar with what Yolk is or what you do, can you tell us a little bit about Yolk Literary, which I believe you co-founded, right?
Yeah, I co-founded Yolk Literary with a couple of friends back in 2019. And we're a literary journal. Biannually, we publish in print, and then we publish on our digital publication every 2 to 3 weeks. So we're a literary publication, a literary magazine, and we're also known for hosting events as well. We try to keep a sort of like physical presence in the city as well by hosting multiple events.
Your pop-ups, right?
Pop-up poetry events are one of them. So we have a partnership with Time Out Market on St. Catherine, and we have a station of typewriters set up there where we type out poems for passing pedestrians.
That's awesome.
So that's a monthly event. We sometimes take a break, but we'll bring in poets to write poems. Yeah.
That's awesome. And you recently had a partnership with French poets as well, right?
That's right, yeah. So with the help of a Trellis grant, we were able to hire some French poets to write poems in French for French pedestrians. Prior to that, we had mostly been writing in English. We'd be lucky if we'd brought a French poet in, but it wasn't a regular occasion. And then we were able to pay our poets and pay some French poets to come and write poems in French. Yeah.
That's amazing. So tell me how that process goes. Of like someone comes by and then do they ask for a theme?
Well, so usually people are enamored by the like clicking and clacking of typewriters. You know, you don't often see one, let alone like several typewriters stationed together. And then people stop by, they're sort of intrigued, like what's going on here? They have no idea. They're like, is that a typewriter? I haven't seen one of those in decades. And then we just tell them like, look, we're writing poems for people for free. And then they're usually suspicious, like what's the catch? What do you want from me? And we're like, nope, just a genuine experience of, you being able to speak with a poet and sort of speak with them in an honest way that you might not be able to with strangers, you know. And then we get them to speaking about their lives, what's on their minds, what's been going on recently. And sometimes they'll actually be very forthright about what they want the poem to be about, whether it's, you know, a relative or a pet or a recent memory they've had. And then we sort of urge them to take a couple of minutes, walk around the market, and then the poet will bash out a poem based off the conversation they've had with this participant.
Oh, wow. Like in a few minutes, just like that.
Yeah, it's quick. It's quick. Like from start to finish, I would say it's 5 to 10 minutes with conversation and poem written. And then what we'll do is we'll give them the poem for free so they can take it home as a sort of memento of the experience. And so they get to walk away with a poem from.
That's amazing. Imagine how that would brighten someone's day.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, people are usually they're moved by the experience. And I don't anymore, but I used to write at these events. And it's kind of amazing how you drop pretense so quickly and get into a very intimate conversation with a stranger who are really surprisingly open to talking about some profound things going on in their lives. There's something about having a poem to commemorate whatever it is they want to be commemorated that really sort of breaks down some walls. And any poet who has written at these pop-up poetry events always, like after their first time, they always remark like how incredible it is to be able to connect with strangers like that. And it's a very intimate setting and moment.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
You know? Like in a time when like we're all walking around just on our phones and not seeing the others, you know, we get to have like this meaningful connection.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
And that's something literature does, I guess, in general.
Right? Yeah, that's it. And I think that there's something democratic about it and making it very accessible, because I think sometimes people are a little bit standoffish or wary of poetry, let alone, you know, literature maybe, but poetry even more so. And so there's something about just dropping it in the street and having someone walk by and discover it that makes them, and this is coming from people's remarks and feedback on the event, think like, oh, maybe poetry is for me. Maybe poetry is something that I can access and find myself in. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
And is that your ethos for Yolk in general?
I would say that Yolk's ethos encompasses that. We do want to make poetry a little bit more accessible and literature more accessible in general, and appeal to perhaps people who might not have found literature otherwise. So that's echoed in other events that we've hosted in the past as well, where we try to bring something fresh and novel that might appeal to people who don't typically attend poetry events. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's really cool, honestly. I think, we need more of that, right? Of like literary accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
But like you say, it's part of it then. What drove you to create Yolk, to the co-founders? Like what made you, it seems like most of your Concordia MA grads, am I correct in saying that?
It was a sort of crossover between Concordia undergrads. I hadn't completed my MA yet at this point. And then some fellow bishops, university students in the townships, friends, my best friend at the time, and still my best friend, Alex.
You made it seem
drama. That's a whole other interview. No, we're still dear friends. And it was originally his idea to start a literary journal. A little backstory. I had been trying to start a writing group, and there were multiple failed iterations of that. And we just couldn't get a group of people to get together consistently. And then Alex was like, well, this isn't working. Maybe let's find another way to bring writers together in a physical space. So at first, and he was a student at Bishop, so that's why there was a crossover there. But so at first, the literary journal was almost an excuse to bring people together in a physical space. It was almost secondary to the events, which is funny because that's obviously not the case anymore. But in those sort of like founding moments, we were looking for something literary that would be able to bring people together. We were looking for an excuse. And what we ended up finding is the way that we brought writers together in physical spaces for events was very symbolically and well mirrored in bringing writers together in print. And so it was a perfect pairing to be anthologizing and collecting writers' work and printing them together, and then also bringing these writers together in physical spaces.
Awesome. And then it just kind of grew from there, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think on our very first event, we sort of made a bit of a splash by hosting a unique event. Let's say it was called Egg the Poet. And it was, I've spoken about this quite a bit because it was our founding event, and it was in, I think January or February of 2020. So just a miserable winter day. It's astounding that anyone left their homes. And it was our very first event, and it was a poetry reading. So, notoriously not always the most well-attended events. Right. Of course, there are exceptions, but, and we had about 100 people attend this very first event, and we were, of course, ecstatic and energized by this turnout. And it was just an affirmation that there were people out there who wanted to gather and to be a part of a literary community, and then also people who weren't a part of literary communities who were interested in this type of gathering and event.
Yeah, and why was it called Egg the Poet?
That's a good follow-up question. It's perhaps a little on the nose, but in lieu of snapping or clapping, we distributed eggs, and
actual
eggs, expired, and we encouraged the audience to egg the poet after they were finished their reading. So the poets obviously volunteered and knew what they were in for. And then we clad them in like billy boots, a yellow raincoat, yellow rain pants, so that their clothing wasn't ruined. And of course, you'll understand the link with our literary journal called Yolk. Yeah. So our founding event was Egg the Poet.
That's amazing. Yeah. It's very 2020. You couldn't do that with the price of eggs these days.
No, God, no. And we have retired that event for obvious reasons. Yeah.
That's very funny. Yeah. And also February 2020, just before, I guess, a very important historical event.
Yes, of course. And that, I mean, who could have foresaw that and planned that? But I mean, the timing of it was strange, because just as we launched this journal and had a successful in-person event, of course, the pandemic was just around the corner, and we had to move everything digitally. And at first we were like, well, this defeats the purpose of what we started. And yet people still showed up. And if anything, that was a time where people needed community more than ever. And so if anything, it was a sort of opportunity for us to take a step back and concretize what it was we were trying to doing, and also organize and refine our sort of internal processes and how we wanted to operate moving forward. And once people were able to gather again, of course, we resumed.
Huh. Yeah. But do you think the pandemic actually helped you make it more of a journal as opposed to an event?
I think it helped us. Yeah, I do. I think it helped us focus on the publication part of things, and to really see the importance in that as well. Now, of course, the publication itself and the publishing of work is paramount. Whereas at the beginning, I think we were really interested in just hosting events. But at the same time, I don't want to discount how big of a part of our identity hosting events are as well. Yeah.
Yeah, to have that presence both physically and, in what you can read. Or...
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, of course, there's also the physical limitations of an in-person event. And we want to be more than just a Montreal-based literary journal. And we want to be a journal that's situated in Montreal, but appeals to a Quebec readership, a Canadian readership, and eventually, hopefully, a French readership as well.
French is in France?
French is in Quebec.
Okay.
But you know what? I won't put any limitations on us. If we did make it out to France, you wouldn't hear me complaining. Yeah.
Yeah, but like to bring the English and French sides together, right?
Yeah.
I definitely want to discuss that. But first, that what you're talking about, expanding your reach geographically, right?
Yeah.
Beyond Montreal. That's a big part of why you got the Magazines Canada membership, right?
That's right. We've recently become a member of Magazines Canada. That's right. And we had multiple reasons for that. But of course, the fundamental one was to grow our readership and to grow awareness of Yolk's publication, very importantly, both within Canada and within Quebec. And so prior to that, we had an e-commerce site, so people could purchase our journal through our website, and we would just ship it to them ourselves. And then a big part of people discovering literary journals, though, however, and I mean, I can't sing enough praises for independent bookstores, is stumbling upon them in bookstores. And so we were able to house Yolk, our print issues, in Montreal-based bookstores. But beyond that, no real luck, because most bookstores will only take literary journals through local ones or through a distributor. It's just too much to organize otherwise, to have a bunch of independent journals reaching out to you and organizing shipment and payment. So Magazines Canada is a national distributor, and they have helped us place our print journal in bookstores across the country.
Wow, so that's a big step, definitely.
Definitely. It's resulted in increased print, and exactly that, more viewership and readership.
Are there any journals in Canada or just in general that you look to as like an example of what you'd like Yolk to become?
I mean,
New Quarterly, maybe?
Oh, New Quarterly is a fantastic literary journal. Of course, there are so many literary journals in Canada, and many of them we look up to. New Quarterly does so much well. They've just recently launched a podcast, which I think is fantastic. And I'm slightly biased myself, but I'm quite partial to their fiction. They publish fantastic short stories. Brick is another unbelievable literary journal based in Canada, in Ontario, I believe. And they're a nonfiction publisher, and I'm a big fan of the interviews they put out as well. I've always liked Grain as well, a journal of eclectic writing, I think is their byline. I could rattle off many more, and there are many journals that we take inspiration from. And it's great to see that there is that sort of conversation, exactly. Yeah. And, we're a newer, younger journal, and these are much more established literary journals. So, of course, we take inspiration from them, but it's also, it's great to sort of enter that conversation and introduce ourselves as well. And it's been exciting to be,
playing with the big boys.
Yeah. I guess that results in something like, swapping journals and like, sending each other our issues and seeing what we're up to.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And any French journals here in Quebec that interest you, since that outreach is becoming a big part of what you're doing?
Yeah. So in terms of French journals, I'm still, and I'm embarrassed about this, very, very underread. And this is partially because I consider myself pretty bilingual, but my French isn't fantastic. But I've begun to meet a lot of French writers, and it is my plan to bring in a French outreach coordinator for Yolk, who the purpose is to have someone who's much more aware of the French literary community and to make us aware of which journals we should be looking out for and which French writers are up and coming and interesting, and do that work, that really important work of bridging the Anglophone and Francophone literary communities.
Yeah. No, it's definitely like a process.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why you got the French ambassador position, right?
That's right. I've said French outreach coordinator, but French ambassador is another is the official title, and it's exactly that. It's Isabelle Cou, who will be bringing on more officially to help us organize French events, which I can talk to more later if you'd like. But also, exactly that, to start building these bridges with French publishers, literary journals, writers, and readership.
And it's a whole different ecosystem, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny and definitely a little sad, but the Francophone and Anglophone literary communities do tend to operate in silos. And I do think that generally speaking, there's a lack of awareness of each other. That's of course not true across the board, but certainly something to note.
Yeah, it's funny to me that I've been at Salon du Livre many times.
Yes, yeah.
And you see there much more writers from France or Belgium than writers from Ontario.
Yes, that's right.
It's very much like a francophonie,
yeah,
right? Whereas at Anglo literary events, it's the opposite. Like you'd see writers from the U.S. very often, but
that's right.
Rarely Quebec French. Right?
Yeah.
So you're, tell me a bit about why you think it's important to create that bridge there.
Yeah, well, I think that we have two really interesting, vibrant cultures cohabitating. And it's interesting to me that, I mean, beyond the obvious reasons, why they're not in conversation. And I know many French writers, obviously, here based in Quebec, doing really interesting things and writing really interesting work. And selfishly, I just want to know more about it and be aware. And I think there are a lot of people in my position as well. And I don't want to assume anything on the part of the Francophone community because I'm not a part of it. But I believe it's a sort of bidirectional interest, and to an extent. And it's surprising to me that there isn't more open dialogue between the two. And that's also why I think the work of translators is so incredibly important, because a lot of time they will help an English reader and Anglophone literary community become aware of the important work coming out of the French writing community.
Yeah. And that, I guess, brings us to your translation feature, right?
Yeah.
Which you debuted recently. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that's right. So we recently published a short story in our recent print issue, in issue 4.2, volume 4.2, by Pascal Milot. translated by Shelley Pomerantz. The story is called Normal Variant, and I won't spoil it at all, but it won the CBC Prix du Radio-Canada prize in French. And then we published it in English for the first time in our print issue. And we were really excited about that. It's our first time ever publishing a French piece in translation, and therefore working with a French writer and a translator as well. And so that's, we've just launched that as a new print initiative that we'll be publishing in every other print issue, with the hopes eventually of expanding that initiative.
Yeah, and what's the reaction been to it so far?
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, so many people have commented on how much they enjoyed the story and how grateful they were to be able to have access to this story, which they otherwise wouldn't have. Because again, you know, we have a big readership who don't speak French. And this is a very notable and well-crafted story. And as I said, it won the CBC Prix du Radio-Canada prize for fiction. And so it's a notable story that our readership would not have otherwise been able to access, and they were grateful to be able to, because it's a fantastic story.
Yeah, I guess it's just that simple, right? I mean, there's great work being done by both communities, and we want as many people as possible to be able to read all of it.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. At its core, it's a simple initiative, but I think an important one.
Yeah. Yeah. No. It's amazing people haven't done it before.
Honestly. Yeah, and I'm sure there have been efforts and attempts, and some successful, some not so much. But the result is that there still are these two literary communities largely working in silos, and there are so many great translators who have been putting in effort to do exactly that. I mean, Shelley Pomerantz translated this short story for Yolk, but another name that comes to mind is Neil Smith, a local Montreal writer who does fantastic translation work and is really passionate about this this idea of bridging the Francophone and Anglophone literary communities.
Yeah, amazing. Well, you're actually making me think of a bit of a different subject here. Maybe what we were actually discussing before we started the video here about translation and the rise of AI.
Right.
That's something a lot of translators I know have been very despairing about, but also defiant about. You know, because like they know their worth, but there's a lot of people who think like, oh, you can just put it in Google. You know?
Yeah.
So like, what's your view on that?
Yeah, it'd be really funny if I was talking all of this and then in our next print issue at the bottom you saw translated by DeepL. No, I mean, that's, of course, I'm not a translator, so I won't be able to speak to this issue as eloquently as a translator could. But I know that translation software has gotten to a very impressive place. But when you listen to a translator speak about the nuance of translation and all the considerations that they take when they're translating a work, so much would be lost by not bringing in translators who understand so much more about translation than AI translation softwares do, and are not just there to translate the work, but also serve as proponents for the writers and to help spread awareness about the community and language that they're translating. So, I mean, we just lose a great deal if we ever resorted to translation software over the work of translators.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
But in terms of writing in general, are you also an AI, I guess, absolutist? Like no AI work will ever appear in Yolk, would you say?
I think I can pretty confidently say that we're steering clear of AI work and likely will. I'm interested in AI. I think it's fascinating, and obviously it seems here to stay. And people are doing interesting things with it. I think of someone like Sean Michaels, who I've heard speak on panels about the rise of AI and what that means for the writing community, and also writing novels and books that take up AI as central characters and topics. So in that sense, I'm not ignoring it, and Yolk isn't ignoring it, but the idea of publishing AI generated content to me is not very interesting. If there are artists who are collaborating with AI in interesting ways, I'm open to that, and I'd be curious to hear more about that. I write about AI myself as well, just as a topic of general interest, but there's a difference between using AI to write and then exploring AI as a topic of writing. So that might be a long-winded way of answering your question.
No, but I do agree also. I know some writers who are very upset that NaNoWriMo recently embraced AI, right?
Yeah, and there was also, I'm sorry, it's off the top of my head, I can't remember who it was, but there's a literary festival that had proposed an AI, have you heard of this? It was like an AI event where they were going to, I can't remember the details exactly, but something like it was it was totally an AI-based literary event where there was going to be AI generated content. And the public backlash to that was incredible. I mean, people were not thrilled. They were like really criticizing this festival for having made that decision.
Well, that's heartening.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. So I think, that is heartening. There are people who don't want to see, who are, I think, interested in the idea of ways of exploring AI, but don't want it to see it replace, people, writers, and artists when it comes to print or, places on panels and for events like festivals. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, call me old-fashioned, but I think an AI wouldn't give you the thrill of writing you a poem,
Yeah.
if you walked by it,
That's right. And I mean, the poem is the product. It's the reminder of the interaction that you've had with another person who's listened to you, understood you, and processed it and produced something that's just a product of the meaningful interaction. And you don't have that in the same way with AI generated poem, obviously.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so do you think that's a bit of a leading question I'm going to ask, but I have a feeling, I think I know what you'll say, like the future of literature, in a way, of like the literary industry, is to lean more on these in-person events, like the kind that Yolk is doing, because those are genuine things that can't be replicated.
Yeah, I think that's a large part of it. I mean, I think that in-person is a facet, or what I want to say, sorry, is community, and especially in-person community, I think will be a way to combat that worry and to bring people together and, avoid this risk of and worry of people being replaced and substituted by AI, which I think is a valid and real concern and anxiety that artists are facing.
Yeah. No, it's amazing. I really want to come by one of these poetry pop-ups.
Yeah, you're more than welcome. We'd be happy to have you, and we'd if I'm there, I'll personally write you one.
Well, thank you. Awesome. Well, are there any concluding thoughts you want to give here, Curtis? I feel like we've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
But just what do you see for Yolk in the future?
Yeah.
All these ventures we've discussed, like connecting French and English communities, fostering in-person interaction, like competing with the big boys, and, literary journals.
Yeah. Well, we have many designs, and we are often, while simultaneously solidifying what it is we already do and improving what we already do, we're also looking to grow and start new initiatives. I meet with our managing editor, Pamela Hensley, quite regularly, and we just brainstorm what we want to do next. And we're lucky to have quite a big team at Yolk, all of who are willing and interested in contributing to that conversation as well, and letting us know what they think is next for Yolk and where they'd like to see Yolk go. And in the context of this conversation, I mean, part of that is expanding the translation feature. Once a year in print is a great start, but it's not quite enough to achieve what we're looking to do. So more regular translation publications, both in print and digitally, as well as some events that would facilitate our publications, our publishing of translations. and bring the Anglophone and Francophone literary communities together in one space. Pop Montreal hosted a reading in the summer of 2024. I'm sure it was a continued series, and they've done so in 2025 and prior to that as well, where they brought writers from an English and a French publishing house to read together, and it was a bilingual reading. And I was lucky to be one of the writers and readers there, because they brought Vehicle Press as the English language publishing house. And it was amazing. I mean, I met French writers who have been operating in the city for years who I hadn't known of. And it was incredible to have those two communities brought together in the same room. So we're going to take inspiration from that and replicate that of sorts, while also looking for different new exciting ways to bring those two communities together and represent translation in person. We have some sort of experimental reading ideas for that, but I'll keep those close to my chest for now.
Pocket.
Yeah,
All
exactly. Right. I also think, there are bigger ideas that we have that I also won't say too much of, but I think the idea of, we have a great literary festival in the city already, Blue Metropolis, and they do fantastic work. And that's another sort of umbrella under which you can host many events and appeal to a very wide audience. So I think there's room for more, so for other festivals and perhaps some events with a focus on bilingual events as well. So that's something that we've been exploring, and yeah, amongst other things. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I look forward to seeing it. And thank you so much for coming in, Curtis.
Thank you for your questions and for this conversation, Fred. It's good to meet you.